All right, guys, I'm back. Another day, another video. So, sorry for the lack of videos, but I've been pretty busy. So, for those that are not in the know, I've started my own startup, basically. Right now, it's just me, but I did manage to get into a startup program from the Arweave blockchain and get some funding. So, I decided to create a series of videos where I talk about sort of not only the technical aspects. I'm definitely going to get into that for app building, tech stack, why I've done various things, as well as digging into the code and all of that stuff as usual. But I also want to kind of give you guys a feel for what it's like to begin a startup, especially one where you're the only person in the startup. We'll go into things like getting into a program like the Arweave startup program called Open Web Foundry, trying to do demos, trying to interact with investors, some of the things that you should be aware of there. And like I said, all the tech stuff, all the programming related stuff as well. So, yeah, let's get started. So, as you can see by the Xcode project that's visible here, this is the project itself. And I'm going to go into it in a bit, but I wanted to kind of talk about what DeChat is supposed to be. And basically, DeChat is a decentralized and censorship resistant chatting or discussion application. And like I said before, DeChat is based on the Arweave blockchain. And I think probably a great deal of you guys don't know what Arweave is, or you have really zero experience with it. But basically, it is like the database of blockchains. So the blockchains that I'm sure you guys are already familiar with, like Ethereum and Solana, and Avalanche and various projects like that, almost all of them, without exception, when they have large amounts of data that they need to store cheaply, and also in a way that's permanent and cannot be tampered with, updated, modified in any way, they actually put that data not on their own blockchain, but they put it onto Arweave. So what that means is that Arweave is an immutable data store. So once you put data onto Arweave, unlike other solutions like IPFS or whatever, basically that data is guaranteed to be there forever and is also guaranteed not to be able to be tampered with or modified in any way. So it's kind of this unknown but very heavily used blockchain. And of course, in the longer term, for a social media application like DChat, which is going to be very similar to Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, we're going to be generating an enormous amount of data. So having this sort of blockchain as the backend solution just makes sense. So like I said, this is the application. And then if you take a look at it, the structure or the design structure of it is pretty simple. I've got a domain folder with things that are underneath the UI layer that I'm going to be sharing throughout the application. And then I've got a presentation folder, which obviously is going to have all the UI stuff, but it's also going to have the VMs, the view models in there as well. Let's take a look at the application. So, of course, this is a simulator, and if you take a look at it, it looks kind of like a hybrid of Twitter and Instagram, which is deliberate. That's basically what I'm trying to do, kind of give the features of both applications to the app. So right now, for testing purposes, of course, I have all this dummy data in here, but eventually, as the application is more fleshed out, you're going to see, the photos that you're used to in Instagram with the captions and stuff like that. But for now, I've completed the text portion. So kind of to give you a high-level overview of the application, you have sort of the bread and butter stuff like a dark mode. This row over here is actually a filtering mechanism. So basically, by default, when you get in here, you're going to see the post from everybody that you're following. But you can see the individual people that you're following. And if you click on one of them, you're going to be able to filter down to only each of their posts. So when I switch to Tom, then I'll only see Tom's post, and Jin, I'll only see Jin's post, and then I can go back to seeing everybody's posts. There's going to be similar functionality to Twitter in that certain types of posts will be modified in their look and feel so that you can very quickly see, okay, this is a resend, this is just a response to somebody, so this is the original post right here, and then this is the response piece, and then things like liking and things of that nature are going to be visible as well, as you can see here on this toolbar row. So in addition to that, of course, you're going to need a user profile. So just to demo it a little bit for you. Yeah, I'll just put a picture in here. So this is a picture of the Buddha. So the way I set it up is I want to have the app to create a wallet so that you can have all the things specific to your activity on DeChat isolated to this one wallet, so there's no confusion about what's going on in your wallet. And then so I just finished my registration. As you can see, the fields are populated, stuff like that. So that's a very fast overview of the application and what has been completed thus far. So what I'd like to do is I would like to give you an overview of the code itself. This is probably a little bit unique because I've been watching a lot of these day in the life of startup founder videos, and they almost never show their code for some reason. So I just want to make clear, I'm going to go through this very fast. This is not a, teach you how to code video. This is more like an overview video, but we will be taking a look at how I've implemented some things. So let's get started. All right. So in this video, to keep things sort of simple enough, I guess, I'm going to focus on how I implemented the querying of GraphQL of Arweave piece. So basically, there's multiple ways to access Arweave. There is an HTTP REST-like API, which you can use with just about any language. And there is a JavaScript specific API, which of course uses JavaScript. And then there is a GraphQL based API, which I am using for most of the querying portion of the Arweave activities that I'm doing with the application. So in this video, I'm going to focus in on those pieces. So basically, the screen that you saw before is mostly created, or those views and components are mostly created in this profile folder. just to give you kind of a high-level overview of the application, this is a SwiftUI app. We have our main, app bootstrap or app launching structure, which is DeChat app, and then we have the main screen content view. I am using navigation view, so I have a tab view as you saw on the bottom. Let me bring this back for a sec. So this is a sheet, and I'm talking about this row right here. So that is made from this screen, and then the main screen that you were looking at is going to be this home view basically. So that means that we're talking about the feeds that are coming in based on the people that you're following. This is going to be a browsing sort of screen, which isn't finished yet. This is going to be your alerts to the people that you're following. And then, of course, private messaging will be right here. So, and then the posts are happening this way. So this is for text-based posting. And then this is going to be for image-based posting. So anyway, you bounce off this screen. We have our icons. We have the main home component. And then, let's see here. So that's this guy right here. And there's going to be, like I said, the browsing screen, the alerts, etc., etc. And then anything that is shared across the components, I put into this common folder. And then the guy that we're going to focus on today is going to be most of these components, especially this guy right here. And the way that I set it up is that actually this will probably be helpful to some of you guys. So the way that I set it up is I have a global environment object, and the things that I'm using across the entire application I have in this view model, right? So the main things that I want to show is that in this view model, we have this guy. So once you register, or if you've registered already in the past and you've created your wallet key, it will create this profile model. And then if that is populated, right, with a transaction ID, which means that it was posted into Arweave and gotten back from Arweave, then we're going to show the profile. And then if not, we're going to show the registration screen. So pretty, sort of boilerplate stuff, right? So in that profile screen, among the various things that are in it, right, there is a button to edit the profile. So if I switch to edit mode, I can switch that, right? So if I save, it will bounce in here. It will create a new profile. And you might be wondering, well, why is it creating a new profile? Because again, everything in Arweave is immutable. You can't change it once you put it in there, right? So in order to create an application like this, where from the user perspective, some things will be a modification. So as we saw here, from the user perspective, it looks like I'm doing a change right here. In actuality, behind the scenes, I'm adding a brand new record. So the way this works, or the way at least that I implemented it, is that as the user edits their profile and keeps adding new entries via this function, they will add new profile posts that are inserted in chronological order. So when I do a retrieval, like in this case, I'm creating the profile and I'm getting back the result. I'm checking that that attempt was successful. And if it was, I get the Arweave transaction ID. And then with that transaction ID, I get back the actual transaction object, which is going to contain all of my data, right? So based on that transaction ID, I'm going to get back that transaction, but it's going to have the latest created date, meaning the latest profile record that I created, which is a problem because then this member since some date would be wrong because it would show, the latest edit instead of the very first record. So that's why I'm subsequently calling this function in order to go back and sort the data and get back the very first post that was ever done as per this username, right? Which is what we have here. So after a couple of layers of the application structure, we wind up in here. And then the reason why I want to show you this code specifically is because there's a couple of things to be aware of with Arweave. So like I said, there's basically three APIs: the JavaScript API, the HTTP API, and the GraphQL API. In the case of the JavaScript and the HTTP API, all the records are encoded in base64 URL format, so you can't just grab them and read them. But in the GraphQL query syntax, it is not encoded, and therefore you don't see me doing any decodes or anything like that. So just be aware of that. And if we go in here and we take a look at this, this might actually time out, but I just want to show you what some of these records look like. So these are some of the tags that I put into the application so that I can query the blockchain and more easily get back the data. And what I mean by that is, in the case of putting data into Arweave, the data it has a particular structure. So basically what that means is there is a field called data, which you can just quite simply, insert whatever your data is. So if that's a file, like a binary file, you can insert that raw. If that's text, like HTML or JSON, you can insert that text as well. But the issue is that text goes in either a binary or encoded format, and therefore you cannot query that field. There's no way to peer into that field and figure out what's in there and then query it based upon some filter or something of that nature. So if I could show you real quick what I mean by that. So the record itself is just a binary record, or it's some encoded record, and therefore there's no way to query off of that. But you can query off of the transaction ID and various other metadata, but those are specific to those are generalized to all transactions and all records, right? But in the case of your application, you're going to have very specific fields that you're going to want to query off of, right? You're going to have very specific data types and schema of your data that you're going to want to query off of. So the way that you handle that is you do it based on tags. So I'm just showing you the GQL API site because it makes it a little bit easier when you see the schema structure to understand what's going on. But basically, among many things that you have to potentially query, so you can query based on the transaction ID, you can query based on the owner address, you can query based on things like the amount of money spent in the transaction itself. You can query based on the block ID and timestamp. But you can't really query off of the data. Well, by the way, in the case of GraphQL, you can't actually get back the data because data won't come back from a GQL query. They'll only give you back data from either the HTTP query or the JavaScript query. But even if you could, you can't filter off of the data because, again, it's unstructured data. It's either binary or it's some base64 encoded stuff, right? So sure, you have these fields that are built in, but that's not going to be enough for your own application because your application has its own schema and its own data querying needs. So what you have to do is create custom tags and query based upon those tags. So just to show you what that looks like. Now this, I'm going to get into more detail in my next video, which will discuss the JavaScript API implementation. But just to show you what I mean, here I have a function to create a profile. So this is what I'm using in the backend because I'm using SwiftUI to JavaScript interop. And again, I'll get into more detail later about that. But basically, this is the function that I call to create a brand new profile, user profile. So amongst the various things that are going to be happening in here, along with creating the transaction itself, is I want to create custom tags of my own schema, right? Full name, bio, region, website. So for your own app, it's going to be completely different tags, right? Specific to you. But I'm creating these tags so that later on, when I do my queries, whether I use the HTTP mechanism or I use, the JavaScript mechanism or this thing, I can query based upon those custom tags that I made so that, I can filter down to exactly what I need. I can also do things like sorting as well, at least in the GQL API, and things of that nature. So that's why I was showing you this, as well as that information about the encoding stuff. So then if we let this go, oh, yeah, I think it timed out and it crashed, so it came back. But basically, that's what's going on here. And actually, let's do that. Let's go over the implementation of this Arweave querying service. Now, like I said, this entire application will be open source. So I'm going to make all of the code available later, but right now it's not in a finished state. So I'm deliberately avoiding doing that. But basically what I have here is kind of two main structures. So I have this base class, a parent class, and then I have with sort of common functionality. And then I have this protocol, which is going to have data model specific functions in it. So in this case, we've got our profile specific function. Later on, we'll have a message post specific function, things of that in here. And the reason why I'm having these two structures that are later inherited by my main Arweave query service is because there is no such thing as an abstract class inside of Swift. So by doing this, I'm effectively getting an abstract class. So I'm getting a class that has some parts of it as an implementation and then some parts of it as just an interface. So that's what I'm doing. So if you look at some of these calls, right, if we start from the top, we have the base URL. So the network that I'm going to, in this case, I'm running it locally on a test server. And like I said, I know that I'm going really quickly through all this stuff, but it's not my intention really to teach you how to code in these videos. But at the same time, you know, my channel is a technical channel. So I want to show you kind of what it takes to interface into Arweave. And then if you want more like in-depth how-to videos, just leave a comment and then I'll do some of those types of videos as well. So this is a local Arweave instance as a test. As you can see, it's logging right now every time I do like a query or I post a new record. And as I mentioned before, everything is base 64 URL encoded. So if you're using the non-GraphQL interfaces, you do have to decode everything. Just keep that in mind. But getting back to the API that I created, this is the wallet address. Once it's finished, the public address for easy access purposes. Of course, this is a JSON decoder. And then you have kind of some helper methods. This one right here will get the tags, but this one is going to be doing the decoding, because in my Arweave query service, depending on how easy certain things are to do, I might be using the HTTP service to query, as you can see based on this URL request, or I might be using the GraphQL, or I might be using the JavaScript API. And like I said, I'll show you that API in a different video. In this case, I'm just getting a transaction. Here I'm getting the balance. Another thing to note is if you want to use our local test instance, you're going to want to run a mine command after every call, because it's not the real back end. So by calling this, you're forcing your transaction to go through immediately without having to wait whatever number of minutes that the real network would have to, whatever time would have to incur for the real network. And this stuff is because our local instance, even though it's a test instance, it does try to be realistic. And of course, when you're posting data onto any blockchain, you have to pay for that transaction. So in debug mode, I am checking for the balance on the wallet. and then I'm giving myself some fake money, and then I'm doing, the mine. Obviously, in production, there is no mine and there is no giving myself fake money. So that's why in non-debug it looks like this. And then some time conversion functionality as well. And then we have our main inheritor, the query service itself. And as the name implies, there's no actually posting of data commands in here. That's in a different service that I have, which I'll show you in another video. And I have this as a singleton instance. But basically, this is the main function that I have as of right now to create a profile or to get a profile in this case, which is what I showed you on that breakpoint before. And if you're wondering how this works with the Apollo client and GraphQL, I've created a pretty in-depth video about what all the steps that you need to go through to set that up. So I won't go through that in this video, but I'll leave a description in the video description. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how I got here. So I had quit my job and I ended up writing a book and trying out various things, trying out a regular sort of classic centralized application. And then I stumbled upon those issues with centralized apps and banning and all of that business. So then I had decided that I'm going to, build my own app, and I'm going to do it with Solana. Now, the reason why I had decided that was because Solana is doing something like 50,000 transactions per second, although it goes up and down a fair bit, and it's not in production quality as of yet. So they do have some issues once in a while, but I just felt that doing a social media app, which, we know that potentially if it's successful, millions and millions of people could be simultaneously using it, to reduce the potential for lag, you just can't do it on something like Ethereum, right? Something like 12 transactions per second, it just doesn't work. Once I had made that decision and I started, building out the application and all of that stuff, what I realized was also an issue is that Solana really can't hold much data at all, right? They have a 10 megabyte data limit on their accounts. And if you want to know more about how Solana works and Solana smart contracts and stuff like that, I have some videos on my channel. But basically, it's very limited in terms of data. And there's really no way to build a social media application entirely on Solana. It just doesn't work. Despite the speed, people would have to create one account, one user would have to create, in a lifetime of using the application, they might have to create, who knows, 20, 30, 100 accounts in order to store all their data, especially if they're storing images as well, which is what like I said, what I intend to do. And also, in the future, I intend to have an NFT marketplace for all of these posts, images and texts, so that people can better monetize, their content, because the content belongs to the user, not to the application or to the blockchain. So this isn't really possible in Solana. So what I discovered is actually they know that. And so what they do is they archive their data onto Arweave. So they actually don't even store most of their own data on Solana. They actually store it onto Arweave. And what that means is that Solana becomes sort of this fast processing engine, this sort of what Ethereum was supposed to be, this compute engine. And really the database of Web3 is Arweave, right? Now, you might think, well, there's IPFS and file store and all of that. But the problem with those guys is it's not permanent storage. So if on the IPFS network, nobody decides to host your data, then your data will disappear, like permanently, which, for this type of application is not acceptable. So after doing some more research on Arweave, I realized that this is the way to go. And the performance is pretty good. I'm sure it will improve over time, but it's something like 5,000 transactions per second, which is fine for what I need right now. And like I said, I'm sure they'll improve over time, and they also have various mechanisms to try and make that better, like bundlers and sort of background uploaders and things of that nature. So I feel, at least at the current time, pretty confident about the current needs that I have to scale. So I'm not too worried about that. And like I said, really the paramount issue for this type of application is the storage of enormous amounts of data permanently in a trustable fashion, knowing that nobody could possibly tamper with the data at all. So that's why I ended up doing Arweave, even though at the current time, Arweave isn't, really that popular and a lot of people don't know about it. But that's also an opportunity, right? It's like in the early days of the web, most people dismissed it, or they didn't even know what the heck it was. They didn't even know it existed, right? So I consider the current situation for me to be an opportunity. And so I decided to go that route. I applied for Arweave's Open Web Foundry program. Again, sort of a mini Y Combinator startup program. They accepted me. I ended up getting accepted into the demo day, which is like a day where they pick what they believe are the best projects. And I got to present there. And then after some discussion, Arweave decided to make an investment. And I also got in contact through the program, through several other investors, which is why I'm, full-time on this application. And I'm, working hard to develop the beta, which is should be coming in January or February. And I expect to get another round of funding then. I think the discussions that I've had thus far with investors have been pretty serious. And so, wish me luck. And that's basically all I want to say for this video. This was also sort of a trial for me because I never did a sort of less technical video like this, other than my opinions video about, some future speculation and stuff like that I did one time. So tell me what you think about the format of this video. If you want to change it, if you want me to be more technical and actually go through the code in depth, I'm happy to do that as well. Or if you want me to talk more about the non-business stuff, like the investors and how I'm, interfacing with those guys, or some of the kind of design level decisions that I'm making. Because, like I said, I'm very aware that, I can go whole hog on the technical aspects of the application, do more unit testing, do more design structures and all of that stuff. But, realistically, we don't know if this app will be successful or not, right? So when I have investors waiting for me to deliver a beta, spending too much time on things like this actually doesn't make sense. It's not a rational move. So that's the more practical perspective on things that I have right now. And I would like to suggest to you guys, if you're trying to do your own startup, not to get too caught up in the code and the technology and making everything anally retentively perfect and all of that stuff, because you don't know what's going to happen. And really, to have a product that's out there and working and getting users is really more important in the beginning. So that's what I'm doing, and that's my suggestion to you. So that's it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to be showing you more application progress, hopefully. I want to talk more about dealing with investors, managing my time, selecting, or how I selected what to work on, how I selected what not to work on. And then, of course, the JavaScript interop layer that I think is absolutely huge to have. This might sound really weird, especially if you're like a hardcore Swift guy, but JavaScript is still by far the most popular language. And in terms of developers, dependencies, packages, all that stuff, they just have a world of libraries that it's awesome if you can take advantage of it. So when I discovered this interop layer and how I could, not write this enormous amount of code and just get everything working more quickly, I jumped all over that. So we're gonna talk about that. I'm gonna show you the code for that, and yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys.